Tuesday, May 26, 2020, Municipal Authority meeting for Lower Paxton Township. We are all social distance for anybody out there in TV land. Everybody's at least 6 feet apart, except for Mr. Judd. He needs to move down a little bit. There we go. We're good. All right. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Judd.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Judd, thank you. All right, first item of business is approval of the minutes from the February 25th, 2020 Authority meeting, and that would include also the reorganization minutes. Any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes of February the 25th, 2020 as prepared and circulated.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Christmas. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any other questions? I think we can go by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Okay, public comment. So obviously we don't have any public in the audience, but Mr. Weaver, question for you. Have we received any emails regarding public comment from anybody?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at 4 o'clock today, Leanne informed me that we did not receive any emails for public comment, and that's when it closes at 4 p.m., so no public comment on the agenda items.
Okay, and for public comment, Mr. Weaver, what is the email address that they should send their comments to?
Right now, it can go to myself, W. Weaver, at lowerpaxton-pa.gov, or to Mr. Gottschall, and he is at B. Gottschall, same address. And as we discussed earlier, we were going to look into if we are still closed to the public in August to have a special email, Lower Paxton Township Authority agenda comments email address. So we'll be looking into that as well.
Okay,
No
sounds
comments
good.
tonight.
All right, no public comments. Any board member comments? All right, moving right along. Let's go to the sanitary sewer fund. First item of business will be Resolution 2004, authorizing and approving the subsidy agreement with the township for the 2020 general obligation bond. I guess we're going to, Mr. Weaver, I guess it's up to you, but we're going to also have on phone Mr. Wanger from Susquehanna Advisors and Mr. Smita. Yeah.
Yes, I'm getting Tom and Jay on the phone right now. Jay and Tom, you there?
I am. You hear me here?
We can. We are on the agenda for the approval of Resolution 20-04.
Oh, is that, okay, that's the first question I have. Is that the resolution number?
Correct.
20-04.
So, Tom and Jay, let me just open up for the board's information, a little background, and I'll turn it over to you folks. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we met with Tom and Jay and Brad and myself a few months ago to go over the 2020 bond issue, and we advised our financial advisor how much money we had left over in the 2016 bond issue. We had at that time about 1.9. We're down to about 1.3, and Jay recommended, based on the conditions of the market, that it's time to move now. So we had a resolution presented to the supervisors to start the process, and then Jay, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. So the resolution that you have in front of you that was prepared by Tom Smita is consistent with the format you've seen in the past, and it basically authorizes the issuance of debt and the authority entering into a subsidy agreement with the township to reimburse the township for the annual debt service payments, as we've done in the past, we've issued all of the wastewater debt as township general obligation bonds to realize the benefit of the township's AA rating, which was reaffirmed today. So that is the good news. And in your packet, the series of 2020 represents what is described as option 2. So while the resolution indicates that borrowing up to $36 million, we expect the borrowing amount to be somewhere between $28 and $30 million when we actually issue bonds. But in order to comply with all of the state law requirements, we advertise at a higher dollar amount. We expect that the annual debt service on the 2020 bonds will be approximately $1,460,000 a year. And then continuing along the long-term plan that we've had, it's anticipated that there would be another issuance in 3 years, another one 3 years after that, and then 3 years after that out to 2032. Now, the future projects are in a large way a function of what your storage capacity solution will be. So it's not certain that all of those bond issues will need to be done or in the amounts that we're projecting. But GHG has provided you a rate study that contemplates all of those financings being done through 2032, which essentially show rate increases of 3 to 3.8% starting in 2022 for the next almost 15 years. So that's the kind of elevator version of what this financing is intended to do. Again, we're advertising $36 million. We think it'll be closer to $28 million. Interest rates are near all-time lows, so it's a very attractive time to be in the market. But the real driver is you're running out of proceeds to continue the project. So we have the rating, so we would plan on selling bonds probably early to middle part of next week, which means we could close somewhere around the 4th of July. So that gets you another month into paying vendor or contractors. So we think by the time we close, you're probably down to $1 million or less as a available balance to pay contractors for the projects. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I would turn it over to Tom to review the resolution before you consider it as a vote.
Any questions from any board members at this point?
Jay, this is Gary. I'm going to have a couple questions for you.
Gary has a question, Jay.
Can you turn his TV off?
Can you, Jay?
Bill, you're going to have to interpret for me, please.
Yeah,
I can't hear anything.
Yeah, can you turn your TV down? They're getting an echo. Okay, now we're good. So you should be able to hear Gary now. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, can you hear me, Jay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Obviously, the major issue that we have to decide here is which option. And from what I heard you say that you're presenting with the recommendation for option 2. Is that correct?
Bill, can you relay? I'm getting some kind of cross noise.
Yeah. So Gary's question is that you're recommending and presenting option 2 as part of the resolution.
Yes, we are recommending option 2 based on the projects that have been completed and the projects to be completed and looking down the road for future projects.
Okay, I'm guessing the answer is yes.
Yes.
In simple terms. Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. Okay, with that in mind, I also am aware in 2032, 33, that's when the swap will come due, and I know it doesn't affect it directly, but it does have an indirect impact here. And also, so that's one issue that I'd like to address. The other issue that I want to address is that we also have had discussions that we'll probably have to borrow again with probably, in 3 or 4 years? I think that was the last.
3 years. I think
3 years.
2023.
In 3 years. So again, borrowing in 3 years, I'd like to know what the impact is going to be on the taxpayer, because that's who I have to represent. Because in 2035, 233, 34, it will be up to, these numbers are so small, I think it's 238.
I think you're right.
Because we're currently paying what, 150, 153. So, based on this schedule, it will go to 238. But that does not take into account borrowing in 3 or 4 years, what that in fact will do to the rate that will be paid by our constituents. And I know what that means in terms of where I like to be with level debt service. It's going to push the debt service out even further as we continue to raise the amount that our constituents are going to have to pay, even by $5 or $7, as this is also indicating. So I have a little problem with the projection, only from the standpoint there's an unknown variable that could drive this up, and I'm not in favor of supporting anything that's going to give valleys and mountaintops payments to the taxpayers.
Just to
I don't
clarify,
know who wants to respond to all of that.
Bill, just to
Yeah.
clarify, in the option 2 that's on the screen right here, Gary is right. It's $238 and 2035. That's the projected rate. We're saying rate increases are going to be around anywhere from a low of 2.1% to a high of 3.8%. Anytime between now, which will be 0%, to 2035, right? So that's the first thing.
That's correct.
But this does not include any new debt that we're saying we would have to take in 2023, right? This is just saying if we do this bond offering right now, this is what our debt schedule is going to look like, and this is what our rates would need to be to support that current debt schedule.
No, actually, this includes all the future debt as part
Okay.
of the rate analysis.
So this does include it, because I think we were saying in 2023 we'd have to do like what, 18 million of
Right.
debt or something like that,
Correct.
right? And that's already factored in here.
That's all factored in. 2023, we're looking at 31 million in sewer money and 10 in storm, but GHD has all that factored into this rate analysis.
Okay, so with the borrowing, that will not have any impact on the chart that we're looking at in terms
No.
of rates for our constituents. Okay, that was an important issue for me. I'm glad he went with option 2 because that's the one I was considering.
Let me ask you a question though, and this may be a question for Jay. So when I look at, I guess GHD did this analysis here, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, and this is really hard to read, but if I'm reading this correct, as you get out to years 2024 and 25, we start to assess that rates are going to be 4.5% and then go to 5%. Is that accurate? Am I reading that correctly? That's how the rate structures go. That interest rates are going to, we're going to be factoring interest rates on debt at 4.5% and 5%.
That's correct. GHD, Alton Whittle was at the meeting with Jay and Tom and Brad and myself, and we confirmed with Jay and John that that was the appropriate rate to use, and that is what we plugged into the future rate analysis for those debt service schedules.
I mean, 4.5%, 5%. I got to be honest with you. When was the last time we had 4.5% to 5% debt?
Jay, you still there?
Yes, I'm here, yes.
So
I have
di-
a hard time hearing
I-
the background.
I understand. So Dave is asking the future bond interest rates for the future debt service schedules in GHD's rate analysis. That 4.5% and 5% are sort of inflated. Have we ever had bond issues that high before?
No, I'm not.
So then why would we use rates that are that high then? If I mean, I got to be honest with you. I was a town.
What GHD has done for your rate study is intended to be conservative. So the two big variables are the interest rate and the amount of the projects to be financed, which is still a bit of a fluid process and number. But we believe these are conservative estimates for what the rate increases would have to be.
Excuse me, Mr. Weaver.
Yeah.
He's going to have to turn that down. The girl back on the television is saying that she cannot hear him. So whatever is in his background, it's gonna have to go
We're getting
off.
some static still, Jay, and I don't know if it's coming from you or Tom, but it sounds like a TV or some background noise. Do you know,
I don't have a TV on, so it's not mine.
Tom?
Nor do I. I'm in a closed room. I have no TV.
Okay. I don't know where it's coming from. There's only
Someone's-
2 of you on the call.
We're getting Zoom bombed. All right, so I mean, basically, we're using interest rates that are that high for a more conservative approach. Although that seems to me to be a pretty, very, very conservative approach, quite honestly. But all right, it just doesn't seem to match actually like what our historical debt structure has been. That's all. It just seems odd to use interest rates that we think are going to be much higher than interest rates we've seen in this township in over 20 years. It just seems odd to me to put that into a rate structure like that. That's all. But if we want to take that type of an approach, I guess so be it. So, any other questions from anybody?
Well, just on the math from what we're paying now at 153, in 2035, that's gonna be an additional $85 a quarter.
Correct.
Yeah.
However, when you look at the rate percent increases, that does take into account that your expenses increase every year at 3%. So that was one of the directives of the board to try to set up a rate schedule that was balanced. So when you look at today's dollar compared to the dollar, 10 to 15 years from now, it's not a true comparison, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Jay, I've heard this, but I want to hear it from you. I'm getting it secondhand, and I'd like it from the horse's mouth. Our current rating from Moody's and Standard & Poor's.
Did you hear that, Jay?
The current rating just recently is, so it has not changed. To Brad and Bill already received, but it's a very positive report. The rating report, the ability to get a better rating is going to be very challenging because essentially they're looking for a higher wealth profile within the community. So, we can't change that. You've done everything you can do to get to AA. The one concern the rating agencies do have is the scope of this project ultimately becomes a fair amount of debt that could potentially come back to the township and its guarantee or its general obligation commitment if sewer rates, were to lag behind. But happened in Moody's and Standard & Poor's published reports indicate that even during this pandemic, they could very positively water and sewer back to us because consumers seem to be bill.
Can you give me a translation?
Yeah,
I thought this was going to be a short answer. I just want to know that.
Jay, we were breaking up there, but
I
Gary's.
want to make sure that we're still at 2A.
Gary's.
Gary, I confirmed that this morning.
Yeah.
We are still rated AA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, so the follow-up question is, we're going to borrow in 3 years. What's your projection for our status, again, with Standard & Poor's? I know I harp on this issue, but I also know the impact and the effects in terms of dollars and cents that that impacts not only on us, the municipality, but surrounding municipalities, and also the dollars and cents that we're going to have to spend, and the ability to sell what we have if our ratings drop. So I'd like a projection of where we're going to be in 3 years. I know you can't give me one, Jay, but you're better than anybody else in this room to give the projection, so I'll ask you.
He's not in the room.
Yeah, so again, the study, the format that we've been using from the very first financing
You're
was
gonna have to
intended
translate.
to assume higher than typical market borrowing rates. And also projecting, we started with a very high, it's been downsized a little bit as you've reevaluated your storage capacity options. So do I think, ultimately it costs what the current rate study says? Probably not, but for purposes of planning, we try to be conservative and high outcome in 3 years. All of your, the subsequent financings are always a function of how quickly the projects progress and how fast you're spending money. So do we need to borrow money in 2032? That's what we think today, but we don't know that for sure. But you've been pretty consistent in needing money for 2 to 3 years. So short of some significant change in the scope of the project or progress in the projects, we think 2023 is a very likely financing schedule. Will it 5%? We don't think so. Again, for planning purposes, we think that's a reasonable assumption.
So it's a bottom line answer. He's cautiously optimistic that we'll retain 2A in 3 years.
So Gary's asking, you're cautiously optimistic we'll have a retained AA rating in 3 years?
Cautiously optimistic.
There was nothing, Bill Ed did a very good job in this meeting of articulating the strengths of the township, your reserves, the economic base, the stability of the labor force. So we don't think that there would be any significant shift. Now, if the pandemic continues and the economic, flattening continues, I think all bets are off for any rating, but I'm a little more optimistic that we completely pummeled the economy into the ground, and that things will return to a more normal environment, if not within a few months, a year. And I think that your AA rating is secure. We've had this conversation with the rating analysts. We've had it with, the supervisors. That at some point they start to view the sewer debt as being large enough that they have to start considering as potentially direct debt. You have demonstrated a very strong discipline to maintain a rate structure that meets your obligations. Reserves are strong. The township's reserves are strong. So we believe your AA credit rating will continue.
Okay.
I'm glad I didn't ask for a long answer.
All right. Any other questions for Jay or Tom? All right. Any other questions for Mr. Weaver at this point? All right. Hearing none, then is there the chair will entertain a motion on Resolution 2004 at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2020-04 authorizing and approving the subsidy agreement with the township for the 2020 bonds using option 2 as presented and recommended.
Mr. Christman, thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Lindsay. Any other further discussion?
Yes, I have another question for Jay. I just thought of
Yes.
it. Jay, in these projected numbers, now that I know that the constituent rate is fixed based on the borrowing in 2 or 3 years, I'm also making an assumption, and I don't like to assume anything ever, that this also is taking into consideration the bond issues that actually disappear. Because I have a chart that you provided to me showing which series are disappearing, and again, those which are coming on, which are one offsetting the other in order to maintain level debt service. Simple yes will be satisfied.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. I just wanted to make sure that it's memorialized. Everybody has heard that all of those variables that I'm greatly concerned about are incorporated into the projections that are included in the motion.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor with a second.
Mr. Chairman, I'll call for the question on the motion.
Calling for the question. Let's do this by roll call vote.
Mr. Oakes?
Yay.
Mr. Ramsey? Mr. Zumis?
Yes.
Mr. Judge?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindsay?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. I'll be an aye too. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Jay,
all right. It's okay. Hey, that's okay. I
Jay,
thought maybe
Tom,
there was
the
a reason.
resolution is passed. So thank you for bearing with us on this conference call.
Actually,
Thanks.
okay.
we had
Thank you,
A's, ayes,
Good.
and yeses.
See ya.
All right.
We got
Thank
it.
you, Jay.
3 on 1.
All right, let's move on to action on amendment number 1 to the Paxton Creek Interceptor Agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Weaver.
Members of the board, unfortunately, I have to report tonight we'll have to table this agenda item. This is an amendment with the Paxton Creek Interceptor Agreement with Susquehanna Township Authority. And because they have a lot of things going on right now, they did not have a chance to review this with their engineer and solicitor. Dave and I were exchanging emails, and without having the blessing of the engineer and the solicitor and the manager for Susquehanna, I can't recommend any action tonight. So I would recommend the board table this until the August meeting.
Okay, we'll table this to the August meeting at this point. I don't think there's anything else we have to do there. So let's move on to Resolution 200501, 200531, authorizing condemnation of temporary easements for private sewer replacements in the BC7 mini basin project. Mr. Weaver, you're up again.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, these are the standard resolutions that you've seen many times. Our I&I crew has progressed to almost completion in SC2B, and their next project will be the PVC sewer areas in the BC7 area. Because of the pandemic, we were not able to have our public meeting, which was canceled. However, Leanne recommended that we do a YouTube presentation of the actual planned public meeting presentation. That went very well. We had over 65 people view it. We have received over 120 agreements, but we still have 31 remaining. Actually, excuse me, there was 182. So we received about 150 agreements. So we still have 31 remaining, and they've received the 30-day notice and the second 30-day notice. So at this point, we're recommending the board authorize resolutions 20-0501 to 31 to allow Solicitor Stein to begin the condemnation of the temporary easement for the private sewer replacement by the I&I crew. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver?
These are straightforward.
We want to try to keep Mr. Stein busy, so let's I'm going to entertain a motion on this.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve resolutions 2020-05-01 through and including 2020-05-31, authorizing the condemnation of temporary easements for private sewer replacements in the BC7 mini basin project as presented and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Chrisman, well done. Is there a second? Mr. Zumas, it looks like you want to jump in there.
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion on the floor. We got a second. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. I put you on the spot, didn't I, Mr. Zumas? You know what? You were ready to jump in there. You could see it. You could see it on your face.
Right there.
I could see it on your face. I wanted to make sure you got in there. All right, Resolution 200601 through 41, authorizing condemnation of sewer, stormwater easements for the combined sewer, stormwater replacements in BC7 mini basin project. Again, Mr. Weaver, I assume it's the same thing again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is the standard resolutions for condemnation. However, these are not for the private sanitary sewer replacements on private sewers, which are temporary. These are the main sewer easements that run through people's yards. And they are a combination, now that we have a stormwater conveyance system that we do replacements. I talked to Steve, and we thought that we could save a lot of easement preparation if we combine the sewer and the stormwater in one easement plat. So this is something new. This will be the first time that we've ever done easements with combined sanitary and stormwater conveyance facilities. So we have those in there, and also we have temporary and some regular sanitary sewer easements for property owners that have not signed. Again, because of the pandemic, we could not have the public meeting. We did a YouTube presentation. That has been viewed as well, but we just got these letters out a few weeks ago, and because we only meet quarterly, we wanted to prepare the resolutions authorizing Steve to proceed with the understanding that we could receive a good bit of these because the 30 days is just expiring. So Steve really won't be technically authorized to move ahead on this until the actual 30-day period expires. So we're still asking that the board move ahead to not have any delays. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Weaver at this point?
No, straightforward.
All right, hearing none, is there a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve resolutions 2020-0601 through 2020-0641, which authorizes the condemnation of sanitary stormwater easements for combined sewer and stormwater replacements in the BC7 mini basin project as presented and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Chrisman, thank you. Is there a second?
Here.
I'll second it.
Ms. Lindsay, second. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I think we do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Moving on to one of my favorite authorizations is when it comes to the authorizing the destruction of certain records. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. Resolution 20-07 has been prepared by Cindy Fassett, our Business Office Supervisor for the Authority. And as you're aware, the Authority also follows the Municipal Records Manual for disposition of records. In that manual, it recommends that all billing records be kept for 7 years, and as you can see in the index, that those 7-year periods have expired. And we try to keep a good records room that we share with the township, other departments. And in order to do that, we need to start disposing of some of these journals and stubs. So staff is recommending the board pass Resolution 20-07, allow us to destroy these records. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Weaver, I got a question for you.
Yes.
How much documentation do we scan versus have hard copy of?
So we have looked into some scanning programs. They are very expensive. So right now, I believe Brad could probably better answer, but I think the police department's the only one that's doing the record scanning right now. But we continue to look at those, but they are costly.
Okay.
These records are basically scannable because a lot of the records are. Now, the billing stubs, of course, those would not be scannable because that's the actual payment receipt from the customer. So, some of these records, you're always going to have some paper records.
Sure.
But the scanning is something that's worth looking into. If the board wants us to do that, we can certainly do that.
So,
I mean, personally, I think you should. I mean, we use the words costly, but what does that mean in real dollars? Like, what are we talking about dollar-wise to scan? I can't imagine it's that costly because, like, almost every company, business scans hard documents. There are very few businesses do I know that have that have hard copies of anything anymore. I'll just give an example. Public accounting firms, most public accounting firms don't have hard copies of documents anymore. Your tax return is done electronically. It's submitted electronically. There's very few hard copies of anything.
Brad,
Understood.
the software that we're using for, or we're planning to use for permits and things of that nature,
Yeah.
could that be tied in with this?
It cannot at this time. The actual ongoing cost of providing the scanning software and mechanism is, as Mr. Blaine had mentioned, not particularly expensive, although the cost to catch us up and scan the
I
documents
understand
we
that.
have.
Yeah, so I mean, there's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a cost benefit to it. I mean, do you want to go back into history and scan everything, or do you want to just say, look, going forward, we're going to scan everything going forward, and as document retention and destruction policies come along, we'll destroy until we get to where there's no more hard copies. I get that part.
Yeah, Mr. Weaver was correct. We did receive a number of quotes, and the quotes to actually scan the documents that we have in our storage room was it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'm not sure particularly what portion of that was assignable to the authority and what was. I think a majority of it is held by the Community Development Office, actually, but
Okay.
yeah, but we can certainly look into that further.
Yeah, so my thinking would be is, to start to, maybe your cutoff is 1/1 of 2021, where we scan all documents going forward. Everything that's before that's hard copy, and then we just destroy it as the destruction policy meets.
So
Just saying.
just a question for clarification for my own benefit. So everything we have, we're still to have a hard copy. I know we're still, 7 years ago is where you are, but come forward 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and last year, all of that's still hard copy as well, correct?
Correct.
So
on
that
the
in 6 or
township
7
side.
years, then we're going to be in the place of still destroying, even if we go to scanning, we still have 7 years.
So for municipal authorities, the record storage is actually longer. For instance, municipal authorities have to keep every contract in perpetuity.
Right.
For the sewer system.
And I know there are other things, some HR stuff that has to be kept in perpetuity.
Correct.
I mean,
And then
and it's stipulated by law what can be
Right.
destroyed in 7 years. I was
Yep.
just asking that which we're destroying, which falls under those guidelines, we still have 7 years worth of paper, even if in year 21, we start to scan, we still have the next 7 years in which to destroy hard stuff.
Right. So Tim
Okay.
is starting a GIS program in the township for the authority, and we're going to be bringing the township along as well. So Tim could probably tell you a lot more, but under the GIS system, you really the key is to go paperless from the start.
Sure.
So, and when we start integrating that, it'll make the record storing cheaper because you don't have to scan everything, right? So it sounds like the board's interested. We can certainly get some quotes for the record storage, what we have going in the budget for 2021, and get back to the board on those costs.
I certainly would endorse that concept.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, back to the resolution at hand here. Do we have a motion on the floor on Resolution 2007?
And if I don't make the motion, Mr. Weaver, you're going to have to keep them for another year, correct?
I'm afraid we will.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2020-07, which authorizes Mr. Weaver and staff to destroy the records as prescribed by state law.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Chrisman. Is there a second? Second. Oh, Mr. Judd, he did not. Did everybody see how quickly he jumped in on that one? He did not want to let anybody sneak in. All right, Mr. Judd, that's a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I think we did this by roll call vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Good job, Mr. Judd. Way to get it done. All right. Resolution 2008, authorizing the temporary waiving of penalties for late sewer and storm water fee payments. Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As a result of the pandemic, staff has prepared a resolution for the board to consider that would authorize a temporary waiver of the 10% penalty on unpaid sanitary sewer and stormwater charges, and also establishing a termination of the moratorium for water shutoffs of unpaid sanitary sewer charges consistent with the PUC emergency order of March 13, 2020. So that is actually just ratifying the order from the PUC. So a little background, since the pandemic began, we have sent out the quarterly bill in April, and that payment was due on April 30th. We have not charged any penalty yet. We'd like to ratify that tonight by this resolution authorizing staff not to assess that penalty. We are recommending that we still send out just a late notice saying that you didn't pay. Secondly, this resolution would also extend that penalty for the July billing as well. So the July billing would be due on July 31st. And if the board authorizes this resolution this evening, then the next billing in July would also have a late notice in August, but not a penalty. And again, the termination of the moratorium on the water shutoffs, I've attached the order from the PUC. As a result of the pandemic, there was a proclamation of disaster, as you're aware, by the governor, and the PUC was directed by the governor to have a stay on any termination of services. So since the authority has a large collection of delinquents by that method, we wanted to just make sure that we ratify that this evening as well. So I'll be happy to answer any questions on resolution.
Mr. Weaver, how many didn't pay by the end of April? What do we have, like 27,000?
So typically, we collect about 80% during the first month, and then the remaining 15% is collected with the notice, the second month. So we did a little analysis of the previous quarter compared to this one, and we're down probably 10 or 15%. So normally we'd have about $1 million in uncollected sewer, and we're about 1.3. It's like 1.28, something like that.
Okay.
So we have additional right now about 280,000 on the books that we wouldn't have had the previous quarter because of the pandemic.
Okay.
Doesn't affect stormwater so much because we have when you have sanitary and storm, which is 95% of our accounts, when you make a payment, it goes to stormwater first. So there is not much delinquency on stormwater. So if we have any stormwater delinquency, that would be just somebody that didn't pay sewer or stormwater. But overall, I'm really surprised that the delinquency isn't higher.
Yeah, because a lot of people aren't working.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Weaver, my question
Yes.
is to you and maybe Steve. Within the resolution, down in Part 2, I see exactly what you said with regard to the 10% waiver for April 1st and then July 1st for those two parts.
Correct.
But the third part I heard you talk about that I didn't read, and maybe it does not need to be here, or maybe it does, and that's why I'm yielding to both of you, with regard to the shutting off of water. Does that need to be said anywhere, or is that implicit?
It is in Section 3 that the
Did I miss
township
it?
is establishing a moratorium.
Termination
Section-
moratorium?
Yes, Section 3. Yep.
Okay, prohibiting the termination. Okay, I'm
Correct.
fine. I'm good.
Yep.
I didn't go far enough in my reading. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Weaver? All right, hearing none, is there a motion on Resolution 2008?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2020-08, which authorizes temporary waiving of penalty for late sewer and stormwater fee payments as established within the resolution as presented and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
All right, Mr. Christmas, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any further discussion? I think we do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, amendment number 1 to the sewer maintenance agreement with Triple Crown. Mr. Weaver, you're up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Amendment number 1 goes back to a sewer maintenance agreement we have with Triple Crown in the Straywind Farms development. As the board may recall, it was recommended by staff and engineer that an additional guarantee be incurred by the developer as part of the utilities that were over the sewer line. Triple Crown acknowledged that and negotiated with the board, and the board asked for additional funds and a 15-year guarantee. When Triple Crown went to their bank to acquire the 15-year maintenance bond, the bank basically flat out said they don't do 15-year maintenance bonds. So at that point, I put Mark in touch with Steve, and they came to an agreement satisfactory to Steve, where he could issue a 1-year letter of credit, but it's automatically renewed every year. Triple Crown was okay with that. He reached back to their bank, and the bank said that they could do that. Steve, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Okay.
So this agreement would, in lieu of, if you look at item D, in lieu of a 15-year letter of credit, the authority is willing to accept a 1-year letter of credit, an amount of $50,000, which will automatically renew every year for a period of 15 years, and the developer is willing to provide such a letter of credit. I'll be happy to answer any other questions on the amendment.
All right, Mr. Weaver, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Weaver?
I don't want to disappoint Mr. Weaver, so I have a question. In item D, I think I've interpreted it correctly, but I want to make certain, where they're offering each year at $50,000. So in year 1, we start with $50,000. When we go to year 2, again, it's merely renewed at $50,000. It does not accrue. Second year, we now have 100. Okay.
Correct. It's 50. They're just renewing the 50,000
Each year. And I was just thinking that perhaps it should accrue only because as the years go on, any damage that would be done would obviously be more expensive, and there would be more reserve to draw upon. Okay. At least I understand that I read it correctly.
That you're correct.
I would prefer that it accrued, but that's okay.
We'd like that as well.
I'm sure Triple Crown would not be, but
All right, is there a motion on the floor?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve amendment number 1 to the sewer maintenance agreement with Triple Crown as presented and recommended by Mr. Weaver. That's a statement. It sounded like a
That's
question,
correct.
though, didn't it?
It's recommended by staff.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chrisman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any further discussion? I think we do this by voice vote as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, on to dedication of developer-installed sewers.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, because of the pandemic and the office being closed, GHD would normally present this item. This is the developer-installed sewers to be dedicated to the authority. However, Melissa is available by phone if you have questions. So for your consideration tonight is having Shaybrook Phase 1, 2, and 3 dedicated with the condition that the signed paperwork be submitted to the board, complete. And also Blue Ridge Village Phase 1, they are requesting a conditional approval from the board after the punch list items have been completed and the signed dedication and maintenance bonds are in hand. So I know Mr. Chrisman's already ruffling his papers over there. He does not allow.
You know where I'm going, don't you?
He does not like to approve things based on condition. However, at least staff can say that similar to plans that are recorded or not recorded until they meet the conditions, it is an acceptable way of, and Steve can provide advice to the board as well, but it is within your purview to do as requested by GHD and the developer. However, if you're not comfortable, we can always push it back to August or have another meeting. The point made by Mr. DeSanto is that, you know, the authority meets quarterly. He gets that, but he does not want a delay in having the sewers dedicated because he can then start his maintenance bond shortly thereafter. So I am confident that the signed paperwork from Shaybrook and Blue Ridge will be prepared as promised because both of these developers are local. But I'll be happy to answer any questions the board has.
When you say punch list items on Blue Ridge Village Phase 1, like how many punch list items? Is it a lot? Is it 20? Is it 15, 10, 5? And then what is the complexity of that punch list item?
So there's really very limited amount of punch list items. The issue we're having is, again, because of the pandemic, GHD laid off some employees or they're temporarily not working. So we need to confirm some of these items, but based on what we found in his records to date, that most of these items are completed, with the exception of lamping the lines, which that's just sticking a flashlight in the sewer, making sure you get a full moon at the other end. And the other one is having the manholes that are set for final paving. The paving usually happens later for the main phase road. I think it's Alexandria Boulevard or something like that. So they have the old manholes set, and some of them had to be adjusted, so they have to do vacuum tests on them. So what I know so far is the lamping and the manhole vacuum tests for a few, and it's not, to answer a specific question, not a lot of punch list items that we're aware of.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Weaver?
So, Mr. Weaver, what, in your opinion, would be the likelihood that it'll be completed in the next 5 days?
Shadebrook Phase 1 and 2 and 3 will be completed in the next 5 days. Blue Ridge Village, that may take a few weeks because of the punch list items and having the inspection. Actually, we do the lamping ourselves, so we can do that. If the board wants us to do it tomorrow, we'll go out and do it. So, but the manhole vacuum testing, that's out of our control. But I mean, we can certainly set that as a standard to get that done within 5 days.
Mr. Chairman?
Possible.
Yes.
On the first one, Shadebrook, I will be abstaining for personal reasons.
Okay. Any other further questions on the Shadebrook Phase 1, 2, and 3, or the Blue Ridge Village Phase 1
Yes,
sewer
I do.
dedications? Mr. Crispin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Weaver, on the
Yes.
first one, where it says the signed paperwork will be emailed to the board on Tuesday when it's received. What Tuesday are they talking about?
That was today. Steve, I think you want to
Has
fill in
it
the...
been received?
I prepared all the dedication documents for both developments, and they were sent over to Melissa, and then she was going to attempt to get signatures if she could, but apparently
Was
that
unable to.
she couldn't get that accomplished.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my question on the first one. On the second one, the last paragraph, first sentence, the developer has requested conditional approval from the board for the sanitary sewers to be approved for dedication after the punch list items have been completed. I'd like inserted to the satisfaction of the Lower Paxton Township staff and signed. It's like when I'm asking for developers to conform that they will in fact do it to meet the requirements of the township and township staff. I think the same thing needs to be applicable here, consistency and uniformity.
Okay.
So, Mr. Weaver.
Staff
you're
has no problem with
recommending
that.
we do this.
Pardon me?
You're recommending we approve?
I do because I get both sides. I know the board wants to have complete items before them, but because we do only meet every 3 months, it's actually reasonable for a developer to request it because they can get their paperwork closed out as well.
It's not unusual. I mean, we've done this
Yeah.
before, and yeah, I mean, but it is nicer to have it all done. I agree.
Well, Mr. Weaver, I saw that it says next meeting, June 16th, which is a supervisors meeting, so are you having an authority meeting prior to that?
Unless Tom and Jay have other information that's needed by the board, which is not typical, we would not need a meeting today in June, so that meeting would be
Okay.
canceled.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted to, put it on that meeting.
Yeah. Any further questions?
Yes, do you want a motion for amendment to the resolution as it is, or can we insert it? And I'll yield to Steve. My amendment is where, in that sentence, it says,
Well, you would just merely put that in your motion. You would
Okay, then-
move to approve the conditional
Right.
approval,
Have been
subject to it's done to the satisfaction of the authority staff.
That could really go for both, if you'd like.
Steve, that was a great motion. Unfortunately, you're not on the board, but we would have took it. Is there a motion on the floor?
yeah, one more question.
Yep.
Since both of these are conditional, Mr. Weaver,
Mm-hmm.
your job's on the line on this one.
Oh, boy. Can I call Melissa?
I'm willing to do this as long as you're putting your blood on the table, because you know how I feel about doing this.
I do, and I have all the confidence in the world that Melissa will get Shaybrook signed, and DeSanto has been bugging us for months to get these sewers dedicated, so I believe he's going to be primed to get Mr. Zumas' request to get it done within the next 5 days if possible.
And I do trust you, and I know that you're extremely competent, so I'm going to hold you to that value system.
I will honor that.
Thank you.
He still wants to call a friend.
With, with those comments, Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the dedication of developer installed sewers with one addition in the second line of the second paragraph under Blue Ridge Village phases, that it would read, the developers requested conditional approval from the board for sanitary sewers to be approved for dedication after the punch list items have been completed to the satisfaction of the Lower Paxton Township staff, and signed dedication maintenance bonds are in hand.
Mr. Chrisman, I'm sorry, but can you do them separately, because I can't vote on the first one?
I'm sorry, oh,
Could you do them, I'm sorry.
do them separately,
Okay.
I'm sorry,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
All right. Now I'm going to have to say that second one all over again. Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the developer installed sewer to be dedicated to the authority for Shadebrook Phase 1, 2, and 3 with the signed paperwork that will be emailed to the board upon completion of signatures to Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Christmas. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Judd. Any further discussion? Let it be noted that Ms. Lindsay will be abstaining from the vote, so we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Now I think you're back on the floor, Mr. Christmas, for the next motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can you remember this one?
Yeah, I'll try.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the developer-installed sewers to be dedicated to the authority for the Blue Ridge Village Phase 1 with the inclusion of the phrase in the second paragraph that would read, the developers requested conditional approval from the board for the sanitary sewers to be approved for dedication after the punch list items have been completed to the satisfaction of the Lower Paxton Township sewer staff, comma, and the signed dedication and maintenance bonds are in hand. The last sentence as is, please.
Mr. Christmas, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. There's a battle up here between Mr. Zumas and Mr. Judd on who's going to get the seconds. All right. Any other further discussion? All right. I think we do this by voice vote as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Moving right along. Township reports, sanitary sewer fund. First item, second consent decree update on the current construction project. Is that you, Mr. Weaver, again?
Nope, it's me.
Nope. Oh boy, here we go. We're changing it up.
I'll provide an update for you tonight on 3 different projects that are active at this point. The first one is what we call the Eastern Lingelstown project. And Mr. Chairman, if you could just go ahead and click on where it says see map.
See map right there?
Either one of those, yeah.
Oh goodness, look at this thing thinking. Oh goodness, look at that map. Did you put this together?
We actually have a GIS technician
You
that does all
didn't you?
this.
Just take credit for it. You're right. All right.
So just to give you an update of where we are on this project, Dolly's working in the area that's kind of shaded in blue, and the roads that are highlighted in green and red at this point, they have all the sanitary sewer installed, or the majority of the sanitary sewer. So they'll be moving on probably next week into the area that's highlighted there. The streets are highlighted in purple. So that's, Sunny, Jerome, Judy area. There's a little bit of storm work to complete in the red area, which I'll come back to here in a minute. Basically, on this project, there's 2 things we wanted to make the board aware of here tonight. The first is the impact of the pandemic on this project. It was actually relatively minor. Dolly was forced to shut down for a period of about 2 weeks. So we're looking at about an 18-day total, no cost time extension for this. So, all we lost is basically the 2 weeks, just lost time. So that's the first thing. The second item we wanted to bring to your attention, in the area with the red streets, so this would be Nassau and Amy. Yeah, that portion there. So we have, Dolly was working on replacing the storm sewer coming up the cul-de-sac of Nassau up to the first Amy Drive, and they encountered a gas main that was in conflict with the work that they were trying to get done. The gas main was to be relocated as, prior to Dolly getting out there. UGI was to have this relocated so there wouldn't be a conflict. Basically, we have a little bit of a domino effect here, so we can't pave the road until the storm sewer is replaced, and we can't replace the storm sewer until UGI relocates the gas main. So in a sense, the area kind of highlighted in red there, we're being held up at this point from paving the street until UGI can relocate their gas main. We have reached out to them and got estimates that it would be the second week in June until they were able to come out and get started on that relocation.
Okay.
And that's really all I have on this project for you.
I have a
unless
quick
there's any
question on this
questions.
one. Whenever we run into a situation where unforeseen circumstances arise and People's Street isn't going to be paved until, a delayed amount of time, do we ever shoot a letter out or let people know what's up?
Yeah, we talked about that on this. we have all their information in Civic Ready, so we're able to, do the automated emails, phone calls, text messages. So it looks like when we get a better handle on, when, if UGI comes out in early June and actually starts, we get a better idea of, is it going to be
So you know what you
August,
can tell.
September, October, when the road gets
Right.
paved.
Okay, and you have their information from when the whole project was
Yeah.
starting and all the kind of outreach you did at that time.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Okay.
very convenient using the Civic Ready. It's, it's quick and efficient, and we can reach a large number of people very
For those
quickly.
who sign up, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Do we know, what's the percentage? Do you get most, or is it?
The way we've handled it is if we're provided with a response on the private sewer agreement where it says, provide us with your phone number, email address, we'll enter those into the system, and we send out, working with Leanne, we send out a kind of a message that introduces the system, and they have the ability at that point to opt out of
Right.
those messages.
Do most people give you that information? I know they can be.
Yeah, I would say, probably more than 50%.
Okay, that's good. All right.
So Tim,
thanks.
the people that you don't get the information, do you send us a letter in the mail to them then to let them know what's happening? Because there is a lot of older people that live back there that probably don't have email.
We could look at doing that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, they could
So-
get a phone call too. or
Yeah,
the-
if they could get a phone
text
call.
message.
Yeah, if they
phone
could get,
call.
I'm sure, that, they don't get texting, but if they
Yeah.
could get a phone call. And then my other question is, you have to bring UGI in. Are they in the same cut, or are they in a different cut in the road?
It's basically right on, their existing gas main is right on top of where the storm sewer needs to go. So it's a
Okay.
horizontal conflict, and they have to move it out of the way in order for the storm sewer to be installed.
Okay, so when they move it and they're doing a different cut, do they do the paving, or do we do the paving?
For that, I believe, Jeff Klein has kind of coordinated a lot of that. But when we're in an area like this where we're going to replace, the sanitary on one side of the street and the storm on the other, we're basically going in with the mindset that the whole road is going to be rebuilt.
Overlaid, okay.
Yeah. So it's easier for our contractor to rebuild the entire thing than to have, a
I guess
real
what I
narrow
was
trench.
getting at, do we get any money from them?
I believe Jeff has worked something out with
Okay.
the water company. I don't know if he has with UGI.
Okay. I mean, because it's not our fault that they have to come in, but they have to do it, so they should be giving us a little bit of money.
Yeah, I think that the way, and I don't know if Bill has anything else to mention on this, but the way that we've handled it in the past for the storm sewer projects, that we haven't really been involved with in the past, that utility is doing the work kind of free of charge for the township. So we're coming in, we're saying, this is where the storm sewer is going to go. Your utility's in the way. You need to get it out of the way.
Okay.
So they typically haven't, that I'm aware of, they haven't billed the township for that portion.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Ken, do we have a separate easement for stormwater or sanitary within the road right of way?
Not when it's within the public right of way.
Okay. So we have nothing that says you can't run a gas main within 10 feet of our storm sewer?
The township does have a road cut.
Thank you.
Like basically like PennDOT's highway occupancy program. So if you're coming into a township right away to do certain work, you need to maintain, there is a ordinance out there that has the requirements, and one of those is the separation.
Okay, great.
Any other questions on BC2, BC5?
Any other questions on this one? All right.
All right, I'll move on to SC2B. This is our Twin Lakes Union Deposit Area project. Go back to the agenda there.
Right here?
Yeah. And
Okay.
the second,
That one there?
second, no, down on the second page. Yeah, C map. So just frame of reference, if I can laser point over Mr. Ramsey here. This is Union Deposit Road. This is Twin Lakes Drive. Up this way is Central Dauphin East campus, high school, middle school, and down here is Bishop McDevitt, just to give you a frame of reference. This, of course, is the area that our township crews currently working in. They're replacing building sewers in preparation for the 2020 lining project. And the coloring here, red properties are those that remain at this point. Green have been completed, and blue, there's no work planned. So you can see there's not very many red properties left, and I believe one of the two in Galleon was where they were working today, so one of those is probably completed. They're looking at a week to 2 weeks, and they'll be done in this general area. Again, the COVID-19 didn't have a significant impact. We had about a 2-week shutdown, but our crew was able to kind of get back out there and comply with the mitigation measures to keep the crew safe as well as the public. So that's really all I have on SC2B. They're finishing up and moving over, like Bill said, to BC7.
Okay.
Is that J.O. Bradley that's doing that, or who's doing that, Tim?
No, that's our internal I&I crew.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're right. Okay. Because there was an issue with the island or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and we were able to line that portion instead of replace it, so we were able
Okay.
to make the neighbors happy there.
Good.
Good.
So then you got Beaver Creek and Nyes Road interceptor, right?
Yes, this is the final thing I have for you. If you go back and just pull up the map that was attached.
That map there?
No, go back to the agenda, please.
This map here.
Yeah. Yep, that one.
Okay.
Okay, so like I mentioned, we had the brief shutdown on our construction projects. We had basically a 2-week period where there was no mini basin projects, there was no I&I work, developer work kind of shut down. So we had 4 inspectors that went from pretty healthy workload to kind of overnight not having a whole lot to do. So we were able to take advantage. We had them team up with our maintenance department and get out and start walking right-of-ways. The 2 interceptors they walked were the Beaver Creek interceptor and the Nyes Road. It's about 145 total manholes. The reason we wanted to get out, inspect this area, take a look at what we had was, our metering technician over the past couple years, he's looked at some of the data, and he had this theory that there's some of these interceptor sewers that are right up against the creek. Beaver Creek interceptor, as you would guess, runs kind of parallel with Beaver Creek, and the Nyes Road interceptor runs parallel with Nyes Run. So what we did was we went out, we located and cleared a walking path between all these manholes. Our staff opened, inspected, took photos, and collected GPS points. So then we were able to kind of pull it all together, take the GPS points and store all this data, kind of what Bill was talking about, all the electronic, instead of having paper inspection files, everything in one spot. And then, typical with us, we had some bad news and some good news. The bad news, basically all or close to all of these covers are, at the end of their useful life. Very few are actually still watertight. So we have quite a few that need to be replaced. The good news, structurally, for the age of these manholes, they were in pretty good shape, probably fair to good condition. Nothing structurally, no significant deterioration or other issues that would be concerning. So we've come up with a phased approach. Phase one is our crew going out and replacing the frames and covers that we know we can get to without any environmental impact. Phase two, we're working with GHD to kind of come up with a plan as far as access and any environmental permits that we might need to obtain before doing that work. That's all I have, unless there's any questions from the board.
Any questions right now for staff? Well done.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you, nice.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
All right, I guess we are on to BC 2A, BC, BC 5B project construction in progress report.
That was Tim. I just
Tim,
have.
we're gonna pass all this because we did all this, right?
Yes, actually, I just
Yeah.
have a couple really brief township reports to follow up on that Tim had already mentioned, but because of the pandemic, just real quick,
Are we
I would,
Go
for
ahead.
Spring Creek and Beaver Creek, shockingly, no one in Spring Creek denied us access to replace their building sewer. So we did send out a letter to everyone saying, look, we're going to come out and replace your sewer during the pandemic. If you have any issues at all, please contact us, and we will not do it. We didn't get any calls. Now, in BC 7, with the resolutions you approved tonight, as part of that meeting, where we couldn't have the public meeting, but we did the YouTube presentation, I've only gotten one letter and one phone call. I spoke to both of them, and basically I told them that we can push them off to the end of the job, so our crew's not supposed to be into BC 7 till probably mid-July, late June, as Tim just reported on. For Spring Creek, they're going to be done. So it's a year project again, so, next August we can hopefully be able to move ahead on those two properties. But right now, I have two people that don't want us because one person didn't give a reason, the other person just flat out said that we have some people in the house that we don't want exposed.
So you could be doing the neighbor, but not do the person beside them because they don't want it done at this time.
Correct. Yeah.
Do we
So-
usually do that?
Well,
Do you
not
offer
during the
that coverage?
pandemic, but, I mean, not during normalcy,
Right,
but
but
because of the pandemic,
pandemic.
we basically give the person the option
Okay,
that if they don't want us on their property because we're in the red zone, and once we go to yellow, when we go into the green phase, then we'd have to ask the board how they want to handle that. But that's, we're not there yet.
okay.
So, and then just briefly, two other quick things. If
Are we at the
Mr.
poll? You want to
Yes,
see the
if
poll
you would pull
building?
up the poll building.
Want me to pull it up?
If you would, please, just a picture there. So,
Oh, dude, it's
I apologize. Somehow it got sideways.
Is it really that tall?
Yep.
Go up top.
I don't know if you can do that. Oh, yeah, you can.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Thank
Oh.
you. So the board may recall, we have a contract with Ebersol. They were scheduled again, as Tim reported, with the pandemic. Similarly, we only had about a 2-week delay. So they were scheduled to end the project late May, early June. So we will be coming back to the board with a minor time extension, the supervisors, that is, because the contract's with the supervisors. But we expect them to be done in the next 3 or 4 weeks. You can see there, you can't actually see, and I apologize, I didn't take a picture inside, but they did pour the floor last week. That is done, and obviously everything is up. They have to do some utility work, obviously hang the doors, but they're getting close to completion.
So, Mr. Weaver, you're going to move some of the trucks that are in the sewer building to there, or what are you going to put in here? What kind of storage?
This
it?
is all plows and miscellaneous equipment from the I&I crew that we've accumulated for years, and
Okay,
it
it's
just
just hanging
hogged
out.
up just hogged up the garage where we couldn't even move. And we have some equipment at the old Authority garage as well.
At Walnut Street?
Yes, and we'll move that out of there since this, when soon as this is done.
Okay.
And we can have a ribbon cutting if you'd like. And then lastly, just quick, I put in this spreadsheet showing what GHD did as a contingency plan during the pandemic. This has been, ironically, there's always some silver linings. The pandemic did allow us to see that GHD was very organized from working from home. So they gave us an 8-week contingency plan. As part of that, they gave us a task list with priorities. And that's what you see in front of you there. Some were urgent, some were important, some were medium. But you can see, as you can, the board is sort of, I'm preaching to the choir here about how busy our authority is at these authority meetings, but you can see from the list of all the projects that GHD is working on. So I believe Brad had suggested maybe we may want to consider doing something like this for the township as well, and we will look into doing this at the next meeting with, HRG does it as part of their engineers report, but a task like this is very helpful. And that's all I have for township reports.
Okay. Let's go to the engineer's report.
Kevin's available. If you have any questions, I can get him on the phone.
Any questions on the engineer's report from anybody that wants to have a discussion on this with Kevin? Come on, somebody's got to have a question. Any questions? No questions.
I didn't know who Kevin was. I never met Kevin before.
Oh, no, Kevin Shannon. I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought you meant this.
Yeah,
Isn't
no,
his
we
name
had two
Kevin?
Kevins.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We just appreciate Kevin's succinct report.
All right, hearing none, then we'll just move on to Stormwater Fund. Let's move on to a presentation by the other Kevin Fox from HRG, and Mr. Weaver regarding the draft stormwater fee credit policy and review of the stormwater fee rate alternatives. So you guys are up.
Thank you,
Tell
Mr.
me
Chairman.
what document you want me to open up? I think it's this one to start with, or no?
It is right there. If you can just hold it right there. So I'll just give a brief synopsis right there, and I'll turn it over to Kevin. As the board may recall, at the last meeting, we just presented an outline, and we indicated we'd get back to the board on several issues. One being rain barrels, second being application fees, and the third was the adopted inlet. So we have recommendations for that this evening. Kevin is going to go over a little bit of the background of the policy. But I wanted to start out by just telling you what our schedule is. So you can see on our schedule that we have the meeting tonight, and then we want to have a final draft to you based on your comments this evening for the August meeting, and then we'll have public meetings in October. Then we'll have a final adoption in November, and then we'll start implementing next year. So as part of the policy, after Kevin is done, we also want to talk about the stormwater fee rate alternatives. We don't need a decision tonight, but I'd like to get some general ideas from the board and some consensus on how you want to prepare the authority budget in August as part of the credit policy approval, because when we go to the public, they're going to ask questions about the credit and how it affects rates and what's the rate going to be, and we'd like to have that information available when we meet with the public. So we're going to start with Kevin. I'd like Kevin to give you a synopsis of the 17 different credits. He's not going to go over every one, but he can give you a general overview of the policy, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. As Mr. Weaver stated, this, what you see in front of you is a draft policy. The purpose of the policy is allow property owners to reduce their fees, stormwater fees. There's different ways that a property owner can perform that. If you go to page 10, table 1, are the ones that we've outlined in this draft policy. There's numerous ones, and we just included the ones that, talking to Mr. Weaver and his staff, what we believe would be appropriate for this township. Mr. Weaver mentioned about the rain barrels. Different townships, boroughs, authorities sometimes do it differently. Sometimes that they will have a credit, a monthly credit or quarterly credit. Here that you see in this draft is a rebate, a one-time rebate for that property. And I believe that's what the staff is recommending. Then there is the adopted inlet. The adopted inlet and the rain barrels provides the property owners a way to get involved with the credit to reduce their fees. It's not necessarily something hard for them to do if they're interested. For example, doing a rip-breeding buffer, planting trees, would be a lot difficult for property owners to do it. So doing the rain barrels and the adopted inlet is easier for property owners to take some action and feel that they're part of reducing their stormwater fees. I believe there's a little bit concerns about the adopted inlet of people being on the roads, and which is a valid concern. And I think that's what the authority staff would like to have your opinion on in terms of as we finalize this document.
Okay. Any questions at this point from board members on this policy? So when you built this policy out, I mean, how many other townships have you worked with where you built this type of policy out?
Many. I think HRG has done over 100.
Okay.
Through Pennsylvania.
And this is built out pretty consistently with other ones that you've done, and based on the demographics and
Yes,
the
yes.
township and stuff like that.
Correct.
Okay.
There was a lot of mention about Dairy Township. So we looked at Dairy Township, which we also performed with their Dairy Township staff, and talked to Mr. Reever and his staff. Of course, talking to Mr. Stein and coming up with a policy.
Okay.
You know, our original concept was to try and keep it simple, to reduce administration, which in essence would reduce the overall cost. Are we getting to a point now where we're going to be counting trees throughout the township?
No, we're not doing that detailed. No. For example, the rain barrels, the one-time credit would take an enormous load off of the township staff. If the township would do it the other way in terms of having it quarterly, they would have to go out there and check the rain barrels and make sure they're still functioning properly. Here, the way it's recommended by the staff is one-time rebate. They go out one time, make sure that the rain barrel is connected, is working properly, and then that's it. They don't need to track anything.
So it's basically a one-time.
It's a one-time, yeah.
Right.
So if I can put the rain barrel in, get my credit, and next month the rain barrel disappears, and I still get credit.
To get the rebate, that's it. Not the credit, just the rebate.
Yeah, it says a one-time fee rebate of $100.
Yeah.
$100, right.
So to follow up on Mr. Zumis's question, Kevin's response is, we did hear from the board at the last meeting as part of the outline and the concern about staffing, and we attempted to draft this policy to make staffing minimal. So again, HRG has their application fees in there. For the difficult ones, they will be the ones performing the review of those. So the only thing we're really looking for from the board tonight is, do you want to leave the adopted inlet in there? Because, well, of course, we'll take any of your comments on any of the 17 credits, but specifically, because I know you may have some, but the adopted inlet, I just want to be specific that we would need some direction to actually remove it, because right now we kept it in there as an option. And secondly, we just also wanted to make sure that you wanted to do the rain barrels. It's an insignificant amount of money. It's only $100. You could also opt to increase that over time, or even when we take the draft back to you, if you wanted to make it more. Randy recommended 100 because it's sort of the lower end average. You could get one for more, 150 to 200, but Randy recommended 100. So that really, one other comment that I have to follow up with Kevin's presentation there is the main thing I learned from working with HRG on this is that the peak flow control in the detention basins, or what really is going to be the credit policy. So developers are anxious for the authority to pass this, because then they can come in, if they have a newer facility, they're going to be eligible to reduce their fees by 45%. So from 2010 on, that's going to be almost automatic because you have to assume that's not that old. It's going to be working. If you were pre-2010 ordinance, then there's a good chance you're not going to meet that credit policy, and HRG is not going to approve it unless they retrofit it. But if you can get a credit for $20,000 a year over 10 years, that's going to pay for your retrofit, which also is good for our permitting inspection for under our MS4 permit. So there's many benefits to this program. Developers get costs back. We comply with our MS4 permit. So we're excited to get this policy started. And I think between HRG and their experience with all the other policies and our staff, I think we came up with a good policy.
What other municipalities have you worked with that have adopted and implemented, and what have been the results?
When you say results in terms of
How well it's functioning, and how well
yes.
is staff adapting, and what additional work is for staff, et cetera, et cetera. It's obviously the bottom line cost, and
Sure.
the ability to implement it in a reasonable fashion that doesn't require additional man hours, which require additional dollars, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we started the way we did. Keep it simple, use
Right.
the KISS process.
Yes.
And I think we've been highly successful. Now, to add another component, bottom line is how much additional work is it for Mr. Weaver's staff, and at what cost?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm asking, based on your experience with other municipalities, what other municipalities have implemented this, and what the degree of success and strengths and/or weaknesses?
Yes. Probably the one that's been around the longest would be,
Who?
the one that would be around the longest implemented would be Derry Township.
Okay.
And they have seen a great deal of participation from the residents. In terms of upkeep, I do not know how much upkeep they've had to do. I think they had to modify their programming, which I believe the authority is looking
And so the
into.
policy that's
Yes.
being presented,
Yes.
is it modeled after or closely resemble Derry Township?
Yes, it closely resembles Derry
So
Township.
therefore, then, I could ask Mr. Weaver to contact them to find out, or maybe he already has, to see how the implementation process has gone, and what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the pitfalls, what are the things you have to watch for, what's good,
Right.
what's bad, et cetera.
Correct.
So
I mean, I'd like to have that kind of feedback, and I would
Yes.
hope that you would want it too, because you're gonna have to be
Yes.
the person implementing it.
So my plan was for myself and Randy and Tim to go out to Derry and meet with their MS4 coordinator, their program manager, and also go to some other townships that Kevin has worked with. But because of the pandemic and offices
Sure,
being closed,
I
we
understand
weren't
that.
able to do that.
I would just-
Hopefully we can do that before August or November.
I was gonna say, I'd like to have your response
Yeah.
back to that before I have to cast a ballot to say, let's implement it.
Right, we will do
Because
that.
I want to make sure that you know what the pitfalls are.
Right.
What hurdles did they have to overcome? How did they do it that you can avoid?
Correct, we can do that.
Okay. Are there any others other than Derry Township?
Locally,
Hershey?
yeah, we have Susquehanna just started implementing one.
So they don't have enough?
They don't
haven't
have enough.
implemented, so there's no way that Bill could
Correct.
collect any data?
Correct.
Are there any
Well-
others in the area that have done this, that Bill could collect data to find out strengths, weaknesses?
Yes,
Hurdles.
there's Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority, which is up north,
Yeah.
northeast, and we'll provide him
If
that
you could just share
information.
that with Bill, so he'd
Yes.
have an opportunity. I just like, as we walk into this, I don't want to go in blind.
Okay,
I want Bill to be able to have the opportunity to look at it, to do the assessment, to know what hurdles he's going to have to go over, so he doesn't have to face the same obstacles someone else did, because they can say, this is what we faced, this is what we had to do, here's what you can do to avoid all of that.
sure. And another one I would throw out would be Silver Spring Township, so.
And, I
yeah.
mean, because if there are obstacles that we can overcome, then I'm not going to be in support of implementing a policy such as this.
Sure.
Until those obstacles have been resolved, and I don't want Bill to have to be a guinea pig.
Yep, I understand.
I try to be gracious, Bill, when I can.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Ms. Lindsay, I think you got a
I
question.
just had a question, Kevin. So they're those big square ring barrels, is that what you're talking about? Is that what the credit would be for?
Yes, the rain barrels that will only be connected to the downspouts.
Right, they're
Yes.
huge.
There may be 55 gallons around there, 60.
Oh, okay, because
Okay.
I've seen them places where people have them. So what does one of them cost? I mean, you're saying $100 for the rebate, but what would they have to put out up front for the rain barrel?
I think the $100, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Weaver, I think that's for the rain barrel and getting someone to connect the downspouts. That's for like kind of reimbursement.
Oh, so it's not going to be $100 in cash?
Well, it will
Or off
be.
their bill, I should say?
So you could have a rain barrel right now. This
Right.
policy allows you, even if it's connected from 2 or 3 years ago,
Right.
Randy can go out, prove that it's working, and
Okay.
then they would have to
Then they would get a credit on their bill?
get a check
Rebate.
after the inspection. No,
Okay.
it's just a check.
Rebate, yeah.
They will get a rebate, so they'll get a
Randy,
get a check?
Randy will
Okay.
be the person that he's going to authorize the release of the
Okay.
existing. Now, if it's a new rain barrel, now they'll have to provide proof of purchase to us, and then Randy will go out and inspect it to make sure it's hooked up
Mm-hmm. Okay.
properly. This does not include. We did consider that the hooking up part, but that got a little complicated. We didn't recommend that. We assume that people that want a rain barrel are going to know how to hook it up themselves.
I'm just a little nervous of people that had the old ones,
Mm-hmm.
that they get the inspection and they get the rebate, and then in a couple of weeks, the neighbor has one, but it was from the neighbor that already got the rebate. You know what I'm saying? You know, that would have already had old ones. But I guess there's no way of knowing if they're passing it down through the neighborhood.
Oh,
So,
it's
so
the
say a
same-
neighbor had an old one, you
Oh,
said Randy
no,
would.
we'll
yeah.
have it on a database. Yeah,
Okay.
no,
Yeah.
you won't be able to
No.
duplicate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pardon my ignorance, but I've never seen a rain barrel. I mean, are these things sealed?
It's basically
Yeah, it's
a
just
big
like
55-gallon
$55
drum.
It's
Yeah.
Exactly, it's a big.
Plastic.
People put these big 55-gallon drums right at one of their downspouts. It connects into the downspout, and then it collects all the rainwater, and then there's some type, it's like almost you can, like a dispensing system where you can use it for watering your plants,
Your
hosing, garden.
But doesn't that attract mosquitoes?
No, because it's
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 closed.
It's closed off.
It's closed off.
It's not like it's not like the top's open. It's closed off. Water is going into a sealed 5-gallon container.
You had asked us for direction on the adopt-in inlet,
Correct.
and why, out of all those, why do you need immediate direction on that?
We don't need immediate direction, but we want to get, at least at the August meeting, some consensus that we can take it to the public. So we prefer a decision tonight, but you can certainly make
no,
a
that's
decision
all
in
right. I was
August.
just wondering why, is it because that one is so,
It's-
this is different?
Well, it's not recommended by staff. Basically, Randy and Jeff don't like the idea because you're encouraging someone to go out into the public street and do work that the public works employees typically do, and he doesn't recommend that.
That's the
Again,
intersection.
it's time consuming, it's man hours, it's additional.
Well, no, this is actually, you're asking
The property owner.
the
property
property
owner
owner to do it,
right.
so that
Yeah.
we don't have to do it. It caught my attention because that's exactly what my inlet, I try to keep it, I noticed that it's filling up with leaves, and I noticed that a lot of debris, or when I mow the lawn or anything, it all wants to go down there, and I've kind of taken it upon myself to clean.
Right.
So this, to me, on the surface, looks like a great idea, but I get a little concerned when staff.
Well, I think the staff would support the board if they want to keep it in. It wasn't an absolute, like,
Well, no,
don't
I
read, strongly don't
generally,
because they would have snuck it out.
No, generally, I like to know what staff
Yeah.
recommends.
Well, that's the reason is basically it's for two reasons. A, they don't want people in the public right away working. That's A. And B is how are they going to confirm that you actually clean the leaves out?
Exactly.
So then you have to go out. So it would almost be an automatic credit because there's no inspection that we could do.
And the bottom line is safety
Yeah.
issues aside, if they thought this could really help, I'm sure we would make it happen.
The board can certainly keep the adopt-a inlet in. I don't think staff would be tremendously upset. But you have to take it for the trust of the public that they're going to do this.
Well, I mean, is the
So-
staff also saying it's just the payoff will probably not be worth the work we have to do to make sure it's actually being done.
That's pretty much it. We can't verify the credit.
Okay, because that's
That's-
really,
yeah.
if the payoff isn't there, then there's really
Yep.
not a reason to do it. I would be inclined to just go with staff, even though in my simple layman mind, oh, it looks
Yeah.
looks like a good idea. We got so many of them, we can't possibly do them ourselves.
Right.
So I guess we generally will wait for someone to report it, or how do we,
So the adopt to inlet, you'd basically they would get a 10%.
well, no, I mean, without that, how do we in general keep these things clear? Do we
Well,
do?
that's Public Works Department maintains the stormwater collection and conveyance system, so they would normally go out. Jeff would have guys going out on a regular basis doing that cleaning.
Do they look at them? They look at them all.
Well, we have hundreds of them, so
Right.
you can only do so much in a day.
Right.
So, I mean, again, if you want to take the trust of the public that they're going to do this, you don't have a problem with them being in the road
No.
temporarily.
I'm setting that aside now.
Yeah.
Now I'm just asking you, how do we normally do
Oh,
it?
okay.
'Cause I look at ours and I say, I think that needs to be cleaned.
Right.
And I don't know if if the township's ever.
I can get back to you on that. Jeff will be most likely at the next meeting. We wanted to limit the spacing because of the pandemic, but
But that's exactly why I've asked you to look at this
Yes,
with the
for-
other municipalities.
Right.
That's why I said I would not approve this or support
Mm-hmm.
it until I know exactly what is involved. And I don't want you to go in
Right.
blindsided.
So we
I've
can-
already made my comments regarding that.
Right. We can leave the adopt to inlet in for now. Jeff will be at the next meeting. He can address your questions on it as
No,
well.
I mean,
but-
I'm okay with, from what I heard, if you
Yeah.
guys, and there's plenty else to work on. So if
Yep.
you guys want to just go ahead and, I'd rather not, there's not enough there to go against staff recommendations. So as a separate issue, I would want to see
Right,
how-
the
how
schedule, right.
How the township usually does it.
We can
and-
get that.
Yeah, but that's, yeah,
Yep.
that's separate.
Any other comments on the adopt to inlet? Any strong feeling either way?
Well, I guess they want to know a direction from us as far as.
Do we
whether or
leave it
not-
in August or not?
I want to hear your report first. I want to
Okay.
hear what information you've gathered.
leave it in
so
until
I know what the
August.
strengths and weaknesses are. I want to know what
Okay.
you have to face. I want to know what additional costs that you may encounter or what problem. That's why I'm repeating, I know. But by reviewing what others have done, we know, are there obstacles that we can overcome and do them smoothly at a
Okay.
reduced rate, or are there going to be
So-
multiple obstacles that we're going to have to
Right.
face? It's going to cost us A, more money, and B, more staff on
Okay.
your part to do it. They're taking away from their normal job.
We can certainly do that. We can leave it in, and Randy and I can go out with Tim and Jeff and talk to some other municipalities.
Okay.
Is there any other questions for Kevin? If not, I'd like to move on to the rate analysis. Or unless Kevin, you had
Yeah. No, I don't know if you had any other questions regarding the table one, if any of the other BMPs.
Are there any other idiosyncrasies within the policy that we should be aware of?
Well, again, I want to say two things really quick. A, the detention basin is going to be the lion's share of this because
Okay.
that's the biggest bang for the developer.
Okay.
And then if you choose to keep the rain barrel rebate in, it sounds like you do, then we'll get a lot of that. But other than that, the township also gets a credit for Cole Park because under our report coming up next, there's going to be a stream project with PennDOT in there. And so you'll be eligible for the BMP easement credit for the Cole Park stormwater fee.
Good.
If there's no other questions, I'd like to move into the rate
Bill, I have a
announcement.
question.
Yeah.
Before everything happened with the pandemic, we did have the rain barrel workshop. So after everything's over, are you going to redo that again, or because I know it was canceled?
I can get back to you again.
Because I thought they
in
were
your-
delivered.
In Brad's report, I can
Yeah.
get an answer to you from Randy because
Okay.
that's a county-run program,
Right.
not just in
Yeah.
Lower Paxton. So that would really depend on the county.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I thought the rain barrels were delivered. I don't know if they're still here.
They were, I believe you're right. Yes,
Okay.
they are still here. They're probably in the old authority garage, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Tim
where we
said
had
they were.
like the grant for like 100 rain barrels. or
Yeah,
whatever, right?
yeah.
Well, there were 50 people allowed to come to the workshop, and it was,
Yeah, that wasn't town,
Sold
that
out.
wasn't just solely Lower Paxton, that was in the,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
other areas as well.
okay. Because I did have a couple people ask that had signed up, are they going to redo it?
We can find out when they're gonna
afterwards?
have that again.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Weaver, up to you. You are so excited when I was talking to you earlier about data analysis. I think it's all you, right? You're excited about this. This is you.
Oh, we
It's
were
all
very
you.
excited to talk about rates again. We don't have to get Jay or Tom on the phone, so that helps. So board members, again, we want to be able to have some consensus, at least from staff, of where your feelings are. Again, we don't need a decision tonight, just want to start the discussion. So what we've done, we have unaudited cash flow now from the target reserve for the stormwater fund. So what you have before you tonight are three different options that I had mentioned at the February meeting. So if you look at alternative one, that is the current program. And that shows in 2020, we're going to have, after this year, an annual reserve of 1.6 million and a cumulative of 2,374,000. So when you look at that, that includes $720,000 at the end of last year. So alternative one under the current program, over a 10-year period of 2 MS4 permits, you're going to accumulate 7.2 million. So that's problematic. As always, regardless if this was problematic or not, we always give the board options, just like for sewer, we give you different alternatives to consider. So right now, alternative one is not recommended by the solicitor or the engineer, and I'll let them speak for themselves, but because it accumulates excessive cash reserves.
Right.
So under alternative two, we did two things. We took the board's direction from the sewer fund, assuming you keep the same direction for the stormwater fund, is that you want target reserves of 25% of expenses, and you want level increases of 3 to 4%. So what Tim did, by the way, I failed to mention that Tim did an excellent job in preparing this. We saved the expense of having HRG do it. Typically, we have the engineer prepare it, but Tim has the talents, so we utilize their talents.
Great.
So Tim prepared this to show what the best fit was, and basically it's $96 a quarter.
Right.
And that gives you your best fit for maintaining 25%
Wait,
target
96
reserve.
a quarter or,
96 a year.
I was going to say, should it be a year?
24 a quarter. Yeah, 96.
Okay.
Did I say
You
quarter?
said a quarter. I'm like,
Yes.
I thought it was
yes.
supposed to go down.
Yeah, I know. It was a long holiday weekend. You know,
It's okay.
getting back to the. So the last one is keeping the current rate at 128, but we need the support of our engineer and the solicitor, and they are okay with keeping the current rate and accumulating excess cash reserves as long as you have a capital plan to spend it, which we certainly can do as part of our current MS4 permit and our next MS4 permit. So what Tim did was he showed 5.4 million of PAYGO project in 2023, and if you look at the far left there, you can see at the bottom it says 2023 series bond issue. That would normally be 10 million. So when you subtract off 5.4 from the 10, now you're only doing a bond issue of 4.5 and amortized at 30 years at 5%. So you get the savings of the interest over 10 years of doing PAYGO projects. So those are the three options. Basically, I had pros and cons in my memo. That's hopefully the board has had a chance to review those. It's really, from staff level, it's a flip of a coin as far as a recommendation. Either 2 or 3 could certainly work. Certainly the pro for alternative 2 is it's lower than the Raftellus original rate, and it meets the board's desires. The con is, a negative perception if it gets lowered and then raised again because your expenses go up. And alternative 3, it maintains a consistent rate, which the board wants, and basically utilizes cumulative reserves for PAYGO projects. So we just wanted to get the board's thought on which alternative you would like to see in the August budget, and really again, the budget doesn't have to be prepared till August, so again, we can prepare it at the current rate and discuss this more in August, but I wanted to at least get some feedback.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver on the presentation of the 3 alternatives? Any questions that anybody wants to ask, talk about?
What's your recommendation, Bill?
You know, as I say, it's
You
a,
gave us 3 of them.
I know. It's a coin toss between 2 and 3, to be honest with you. They both have such great advantages. Actually, Tim, did you get a chance to run that number?
Yeah,
6.5 million? So I asked Tim to run a number tonight. If you do alternative 3, you save $6.5 million over 30 years on interest on the bond issue. So that makes alternative 3 look good. Also, as part of our Moody's call that we had, Brad and I, they bring this up every year, is the more debt that the authority incurs, basically could have effect on our Moody rating, down the road. So if I had to flip a coin today, alternative 3 looks a little better for both of those reasons.
What would you be saving in with alternative 2, or if any?
Alternative
interest.
2, so the nice thing about alternative 2 is you lower the rate. You have
Right.
a pandemic going on right now, so that's a great thing. And you spread out the rate through amortizing debt. So that's the other flip of the coin, so to speak, is basically to establish a flat rate by amortizing it out. What your financial people do, is Gary's aware, is they do a 30-year rate, but then they can always massage it later and refinance and wrap. Gary always wants level debt.
Right.
So doing bond issues allows you to keep a constant rate. So that's an advantage of doing that. But alternative 3, we're keeping a constant rate. So, like I say, it's a flip of a coin. We don't need a decision tonight, but I'd like to get some kind of feedback if I could.
Bill, what kind of a issue would we be creating if we took option 2 for seniors and 3 remaining for everyone else?
Well, that's we've tried.
That would violate the Authorities Act, because
Yeah.
your rates are not uniform then.
Yes.
Norm, I support that issue.
We've had, to be honest with you, we've had many phone calls and letters from senior citizens, and Steve did research it for us and basically advised the board many years ago that in order to get a special rate, that's because of the uniformity clause, that the actual state would have to pass legislation to allow us to fix special rates for seniors.
Just on the surface, purely on the surface, without having to spend any time, I personally like alternate 3.
Okay.
And my reasoning for that, again, and I haven't had a chance to really do it in depth, but just to look at it, number one, everyone is paying 128. And to go to option 2 where you lower it, at some point in time you're going to have to increase, and then it's going to be a big jump. And so if everybody's accustomed to 128, you keep that flowing nice and even. Everybody knows what it is. But at the same time, you're building that surplus, which is going to offset the amount of money that needs to be borrowed, which reduces the amount of interest that needs to be paid against that bond issue, and again can maintain at a much, hopefully, no, it will be able to maintain the status quo level debt service. So right now, on the surface, without doing any further in-depth research on my own, on the surface, I like alternate 3. I think it presents the best option.
I like number 2, but I think it sticks more with how we've been approaching it from the beginning. I mean, you could set a rate, I imagine, much higher, and we could save even more money in borrowing down the road. We'd have to borrow less money and save more money if you just wanted to make it about that.
That's just exactly the opposite. On 3, you're building the fund so you borrow less.
Well, let me finish.
Yep, go ahead.
So we came up with the initial rate really on pure speculation, just doing our best, what we needed to spend, how much we could collect. That's where that came from. Now we're beginning to develop a real-world understanding of the numbers. And I don't think, again, just a first look, and that's all you want right now is first look, is lowering it to a more realistic number, and then nearly 10 years later, it will still be below the fee that we're currently charging after nearly a decade. I don't think that's any kind of erratic up and down thing that's going to give people whiplash.
Right.
So that's just a first look.
Just to follow, that's a good point, Mr. Judd, and I will confirm that is what staff has done here, is that Raftellus, in fairness to them, they didn't have a picture that we have now. We have our MS4 permit. We know what our 5-year costs are. And we did bill early because we didn't get our permit, so we have that extra revenue as well. So all that factors in to these options. And I did want to point out, I don't want to complicate things by any degree, but we certainly, because normally this is what happens at these meetings, you give us more options to consider. So I kind of wanted to also say, I apologize, not only which option do you like, 2 or 3, but do you want to see other options as well? So I think Brad wanted to make some comments, if you're done, Mr. Judd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You give us too many options, our heads will start to.
Go ahead, Brad.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey,
thank
Brad,
you.
by the way, nice outfit tonight.
Yeah, I
That's a
appreciate that.
sweet-looking-
Thank you, sir.
Man.
Although the camera's not even picking it up, maybe. Anyway, I just wanted to also weigh in on the matter because as I was explaining to staff, in the sewer department, particularly sewer and storm sewer, they are very singular issues. To those members who are also supervisors, I may also provide a comment in terms of if I call it the pot of funds that you oversee. And it's a rudimentary concept, but entertain my commentary, if you will. The supervisors really have to weigh and balance 3 major fees or taxes, if you will. Obviously, township taxes, the stormwater fee, and sewer rates. And I explained to staff if you can consider your decision making almost in a pot, and the pot has only so much political capital, and so we know for a fact that sewer rates will be going up. We have a consent decree. There are established fees from now into the foreseeable future. If we take the approach of doing alternative 2, you are also then establishing, while you are seeing a decrease in the stormwater fee now, you see from 2024 to 2029, and who knows beyond that, an increase in fee on the stormwater side every year from now until then. So we are, as a board, increasing 2 of the 3 major fees and taxes within the township. And again, you only have so much political capital. And I, as your township manager, know at some point from now, hopefully until 2029, you will consider or look at the township taxes as well, because you will have to at some point. So it will become very difficult as a board to, I think, make the case to township residents that you're going to be increasing in 1 year 3 of the major fees or taxes. Could be very difficult political question for the board. That being main concept number 1. Concept number 2, we are still uncertain. While we do know what the stormwater permit assigns as a cost in terms of doing projects, we are uncertain as to the future of stormwater within Pennsylvania. As you know, or may have seen in the news, we are about to face probably another round of lawsuits from neighboring states as it relates to the Chesapeake Bay condition that continues to deteriorate, although that is arguable. But nonetheless, we're uncertain as to the future of stormwater regulations into the future beyond the current permit, which is established. But so I do caution the board, while we do have a fairly decent concept as to what the costs are going to be in terms of our major projects, we are uncertain beyond that. So, if you start lowering rates and then, looking at the rate that way, I just caution the board that there may be a point at which expenditures do go up significantly that we're not aware of today. So they're the two major concepts that I want you to consider when you're considering the fee and what to do with it. For one, am of the opinion that the board should strongly consider alternative 3, which is to keep the rate the same as is today. But again, totally political decision to make, and we'll support whatever.
Well, and that's
the
a
board wants to
great point. You give me something to think about. I wouldn't use the term political capital, just because that might be misinterpreted, but I know exactly what you're saying is that there's a certain amount that people expect, and that hitting them with too much in any given year is just, you're asking too much. So definitely food for thought.
Yeah, and to follow up on Brad's comments, because Brad and I had some good debates, but it made us look at other things, so the debating was good. It is a democracy, and the board actually made the call anyway, so Brad and I could scream at each other all we want, but you guys make the decision. So my frustration I was explaining to Brad is, it is not a parallel all the time. So your policy on sewer you may not want to continue that with stormwater. That's Brad's point to me. He said, Bill, the board gave you direction on 25% reserve targeted expenses and level increases, but that may not be the same for stormwater. And I was having trouble understanding his point, and also the political stuff. I don't go down that road because we're sewer people. So that's what I'm looking for from direction, is just to follow up on Brad's comments, because we don't know what's coming. There are other options we can consider if the board wants us to look at other options, maybe something in between the 128 and the 96, or just go with the 128 or the 96 a year. But again, we would need direction from the board then for the stormwater fund, that you want to treat it differently than the sewer, as Brad mentioned, because you don't know what's coming. Because right now, our direction is keep 25% reserve, and that's how we did alternative 2. I didn't explain that completely, but what I'm basically saying is, if you want to look at other options that include 30 or 40 or 50% reserve instead of 25% because of the unknown, if you don't like alternative 3 and the PAYGO projects. And again, I know it's getting late. We can do this in August. I just want to get some feedback from the board. It's really not fair to ask, for a recommendation from the board, because this is the first time in history that, we've really, for the stormwater fund, that we're establishing rates. And as Gary and Dave kind of remember, Robin, maybe towards the tail start of your career, we've been through this a lot with sewer ad nauseum. So, but we're starting over with storm. It's sort of in its infancy. So I think there's going to be a lot of discussion, over the next, few months about rates. But
And Brad's right, that, the regulations and the lawsuits and stuff with stormwater are different from sewer.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other end, people just know it all counts. The taxes, the stormwater, and the sewer bill is all the same as far as they're concerned, because it's just the local cost that comes out of their paychecks and their savings. So that's a lot of good points to consider.
Any other board members have comments on the rates?
I just think, Brad, that was a good presentation to let us think about that there could be 3 increases in 1 year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
The only other thing I would say, because Bill asked a couple times, is there a hybrid? What would a hybrid be? Something maybe lower than the current, but not 96. Is that even worth looking at? Or does that destroy all the benefits of?
Well, to be more specific, if you want to do either a hybrid or a standalone without a PAYGO, you could do either. You could have 4 more options in there where you have a hybrid of the PAYGO, or just, meeting in between the 96 and the 128. So,
Does that get us anything? Would that provide cushion against?
it does if you have an affinity to alternative 2, but you're hearing what Brad's saying, then he wants 128. That's his recommendation, but if you want something in between, then we could do that. All I'm saying is, staff can only do what the board directs us to
Right.
do. And we're using the sewer model, and that's not fair to you. If you want time to think about it, again, we don't have to approve a budget till November.
I would ask for a hybrid.
Okay.
I usually take the plans you give me, but for this one, it's so big and it is so new. I would ask for at least one other option, a hybrid between 2 and 3, and then that's it. Then
Okay.
we just choose between them.
Your point is
Noted.
well taken in terms of the dollar amounts that can be accrued in surplus, in as much as the comment that you've made, not only do we, sitting here as the authority board, but several of us who sit on the township board of supervisors have a debt service too that we have to be very conscientious of, and especially one other major component within that, which is crucial to all of the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And you all know what that one is.
Any other comments? All right, now I
Okay,
have my
so noted.
Now I
Okay.
have my comments.
Yes, sir.
All
Mr.
right,
Chairman.
so I gave everybody a chance to talk. I wanted to let everybody hear it out. Let me ask you, so just looking at this analysis here, 2020, it says our cumulative reserve is 2.3 million. So we're saying we have a cumulative reserve right now of 2.3 million in the stormwater fund. Is that accurate?
That's what we project at the end of this year.
So you're projecting at the end of the year, but
Yes.
we're at the end of May, so you're close to halfway through the year, and you already know your rate. Your rate structure is your rate structure, and you know what you're going to collect.
Right.
Right. So,
So,
it's
mhm.
probably going to be around 2 million.
I would get, if you're asking me to guess right now, I would say it would be around 2 to 2.1, because of the pandemic, we're going to have a little
Right,
bit
yeah,
less
so
collection.
I understand. So
Yep.
your collection rate's going to come down a little
Yeah.
bit. So we set a rate at $128
Mhm.
1 year ago,
Yes.
and we have now already a cumulative reserve projected of $2 million, right?
What, it's 4 times more than your target, yes.
So there's two trains of thought here, right? I hear what you're saying, Brad, and I don't disagree with it from the financial perspective that keeping rates at 128 and then focusing on in the future on paying down debt and making sure that you have enough money available to do projects with cash on hand, because I do believe that with $30 million bond issue on the sanitary sewer side and another $20 million, you're going to have a very, very high debt structure that I do think at some point in time is going to impact your bond rating at some point. It has to. There's just no you can't continue to keep. It's like federal government debt. You can't continue to accumulate debt service like the federal government has without having an impact on its bond ratings, and the federal government's seeing an impact on its bond ratings. You're going to have the same situation here. So I don't disagree with you in the fact that keeping 128, allowing that accumulation to develop over time, and then starting to fund projects with available cash to keep your debt structure down, at least in this area, to at least give you some cushion, makes sense. However, I will say this. I am of the mindset that you should only take what you need. And I feel like when we set the 128, it was an unknown. So it was an unknown variable. We didn't know exactly what we were getting into. Set 128. I feel like we took way more than we needed. And I feel like there is the ability for an adjustment of some sort here. Because if you're telling me after 1 year we already got accumulated reserves of $2 million when our target reserve is $622, I think that you know what I mean? We shouldn't. I understand the political ramifications. I mean, I sat on the board of supervisors for 12 years. I get it. You don't want to have to raise 3 rates all at the same time, but in the same breath, you shouldn't take more than you really need. And I think we've established a rate with the best information we have, and it was too high. And now we have heavy accumulated reserves already in year 1, and I think that we should consider the idea of some type of reduced rate of some sort, enough that it gets it to consistency with what we want to do, which may be 2 things. A, lower rate with taking what we need, but B, accumulating enough over time that we can start to fund some projects with cash on hand. and to keep our debt structure down. So that's just the two comments I have there. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
If there's none, then just to summarize, staff will look into a hybrid, and we will prepare the budget at the current rate, and we can adjust the budget based on direction from the board at the August meeting on the rate analysis, which is simple to do, to amend the budget on the floor, at least at the draft form, because there's no action. If there's no other questions, I can move on to township reports.
Then no other questions? All right, let's move on to
thank you.
township reports.
Thank you.
I'll be
keep
very
moving.
brief because of the longevity of this meeting. So the two issues right now are the MS4 permit. So we finally got a draft permit, and the permit's ready to be issued. However, CRW and Susquehanna may have a comment letter to DEP. We're not sure yet, but that may delay it a few months. We'll have to see. But the permit's satisfactory to staff and HRG. And we told Susquehanna and CRW that we don't have any comments. They wanted to do a joint comment letter, but we just have a good relationship. Randy and HRG have done a good job with the annual reports, and we hope to get the permit and get started on our projects.
Bill, as soon as
Yeah.
we get the permit, then our 5 years starts?
Yes.
Okay.
We anticipate that to be in June, but the unknown is if we can still get our permit if CRW and Susquehanna have comments. I suspect because we're under the same TMDL plan that they're probably going to hold ours, which is actually
Okay.
better for us because it makes,
Right.
less spending
Okay.
and extends it. But we'll advise the board in August what happened.
But are we getting credit for the stormwater work that we're doing now?
No, because that is just pipe work, and that does no credit for that in the MS4
credit,
permit.
okay.
Only the Chesapeake Bay and the TMDL Paxton Creek
Okay.
projects, yes. And then Tim gave a report on the stormwater, so I don't need to really go there, other than the fact that there are other projects that HRG will be presenting over time. Right now, the current one under construction is only BC2. And then the PennDOT Municipal Partners, that is part of your MS4 permit for the PRP plan. Actually, the bids have been open, but we've been told by PennDOT to keep them confidential because they haven't released the results yet. So I'm not authorized to discuss the bid opening. I can do that in August. I can tell you that CRW is going to sign an agreement with PennDOT to move forward, and then they'll be coming back to us for a task order for our percentage of the cost, which is $570,000. And then we'll be able to give you the results of the bids for the PennDOT project. And that really concludes township reports. And Jason is available by phone if he's still awake.
We're not going to have
if you have any
Kevin jump
questions,
in? We're not going to have Kevin jump in and do the township report?
Kevin could do the engineer's report if he wants. Do you want to do the engineer's report for Jason?
Is there any questions on the engineer's report before we entertain a full presentation? No? Okay, no questions. So you're off the hook. You're good. You're good. All right. Anything else you want to add, Mr. Weaver?
Just one quick thing that Robin, Miss Lindsay, and I talked about today, Mr. Blaine, is because of the length of these meetings and the board packets, 210 pages. Now that the authority has taken over stormwater, these meetings are very long, and in fairness to the board, we have reached out, and Robin has been the leader of the board, at least in terms of the timing of the meeting. So what Robin asked me to do, I'll get back to the board on, is look at the cost if we wanted to go to monthly next year for having 8 additional meetings. But that would mean the supervisors would have to come an extra night, which we don't want that. So what I'm going to do is get you what the cost would be to have monthly meetings next year instead of quarterly meetings for the board to consider, and give you some pros and cons as we did sort of with the rates. So in the August meeting, I'll have that information for the board.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds exciting to go to monthly meetings. Talk about the sanitary sewer and the storm sewer. Great. That's awesome. I bet you people in the public can't wait. They can't wait for these meetings. Shelley, what do you think? You like these meetings, don't you? See, there you go. See, there you go.
Does that mean we knock off one of the regular board meetings?
It would be the fourth Tuesday. And like Mr. Weaver and I talked, you could get like 45 an hour. It's like some of the stuff you're hurrying through, the engineer's report.
Right.
You know, we used to have somebody come, give the engineer's report, the whole thing. So, I mean, it just gives you something to think about. And you don't have to meet every month if you don't have everything.
Right, that's true.
But it would, you know, you wouldn't be sitting here for 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, and trying to hurry through stuff, so.
I think it's more, in fairness, I haven't really spoke to Dave or Robert about it, but in fairness to the supervisors, they're the ones that have to come out an extra night. So, I mean, it's more of a supervisor issue, having to come 4
That's
nights a month.
It's worth looking at.
Yeah, good.
I mean, it's a Tuesday. We're used to Tuesday nights committee.
Right.
Once budget starts, it's 4 Tuesdays a month, so.
And Mr. Blaine used to love Road Tour. We used to combine some of that Road Tour.
I gotta tell you, I miss Road Tour. I used to love doing the Road Tour. There was one specific spot I used to love stopping at too.
That's not a road trip. People, if you're thinking of movies about a road trip, totally different.
It depends on who's driving.
We used to have Mr. Hoffer drive. Remember he used to drive? He was crazy when he used to drive that van.
Mr. Weaver's pretty good. He only got us stuck one time.
Thank you for pointing that out.
All right. Okay. Well, listen.
Goes in the van, stays in the van.
The time has come. People at home want to go to bed, so I'm going to next meeting right now is not June 16th. It's actually going to be in August, right? The fourth Tuesday in August.
Yes, we don't have any business items for June.
Yeah, so nothing for June. Could be July, but definitely for sure, it's the last Tuesday in August.
Correct.
It'll be 7:00.
Yes.
The only other comment I have is Mr. Gottschall. Again, looking good tonight, but I've got another comment for you. Can we look into the idea of using either, in the event that we get to August or even November, that we're still in crisis central with COVID-19? Can we look into using Zoom, Teams, Microsoft Teams? There's another platform called Blue Jeans. If we need to have people over the phone like Tom or Jay, where they could link in, and then we would bring them up on the computer, and they would be actually on the screen, and they can talk to us through their computer. It's a little bit clearer, a little bit easier to understand. I think it's a little bit more professional than trying to have a meeting with Bill doing a conference call on his phone, holding it up to the microphone. I think we could do that. The technology's there. Clearly, we have the technology here. Like I said, Zoom you can get secure links to now, so people don't Zoom bomb you. And Microsoft Teams is another one that I know our firm uses a lot of, so you can do just.
Actually, sir, unfortunately, the technology of this room is not particularly up to speed
Oh,
yet.
really? Okay.
Anything that happens on the screen, the audio of that is directly linked to the televised system. Okay. So if we play something, if we have members, anybody utilizing a Zoom meeting from the screen, those in the room here cannot hear those people.
Okay.
That gets directly tied to the televised system. So it's not, we actually don't have the capability of doing that, because we did contemplate that for the supervisors as well, but we just can't do it.
Okay.
But fair point. We probably do need to practice or work on that, because we've had a lot of board meetings where it's been hit or miss. So we probably do need maybe some policies for the caller and for the board, and hopefully as soon as we get it perfected, we don't need it anymore.
Another silver lining, if I can borrow the phrase from Mr. Weaver, this pandemic has taught us a lot about our resiliency and what we need to do as an organization. So this is one of the issues. But
okay, we just bringing it up, so I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other comments from board members? All right, hearing none, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we're adjourned.